The massive curved walls of First Contact Station stretched endlessly in all directions, their metallic surface gleaming under the artificial starlight that filtered through the transparent aluminum dome overhead. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy moved through the immigration halls like a living river of different colors, shapes and sizes. The air hummed with the constant chatter of universal translators working overtime to convert hundreds of alien languages into something everyone could understand. Security Officer Kai stood at Checkpoint 7, his 4 muscular arms crossed, as he watched the endless stream of travelers. His grey skin had the rough texture of ancient stone, and his 6 eyes moved independently as they scanned each person passing through the detection barriers. Most days were routine, traders from the outer rim, diplomats heading to the core worlds, and the occasional tourist looking to experience life beyond their home planet. But today felt different. A human in a crisp military uniform approached his station, walking with the confident stride of someone who had seen real combat. General Han looked to be in his 50s, with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His uniform was clean, but showed the subtle signs of someone who had spent years in space, the slight fade on the shoulders, where ship harnesses rubbed, the way his boots moved silently across the metal floor. Kai felt his mood darken immediately. Humans were still relatively new to galactic society, and most aliens viewed them as an aggressive, unpredictable species that had somehow managed to stumble their way into space travel. They were tolerated, but barely. The idea that one of them would dare wear a military uniform in such a prestigious location made Kai's mandibles click with irritation. Around them, the normal flow of station life continued. A group of blue-skinned merchants from Centauri Prime argued loudly about shipping costs while their robotic assistants beeped and whirred behind them. Near the food courts, families of cat-like aliens shared meals that smelled of exotic spices, their children playing with holographic toys that created tiny dancing creatures in the air. The constant hum of the station's massive engines provided a deep background rhythm to everything, but all of that faded as Kai focused on the human approaching his checkpoint. "Stop right there," Kai said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades enforcing station regulations. His lower 2 arms moved to the plasma restraints hanging from his belt, while his upper arms gestured for Han to halt. Documentation. General Han reached slowly into his jacket pocket, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He had clearly done this before. "Of course, officer," he said quietly, producing a small datapad that contained his travel permits and identification. Kai barely glanced at the device before waving it away, his 6 eyes fixed on the human with obvious disgust. "Humans don't belong in the officer quarters," he sneered, deliberately blocking the path to the VIP transport platform. "That section is reserved for actual military personnel from recognized galactic forces." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, other travelers began to slow their pace, sensing the tension building at Checkpoint 7. A family of tall, thin aliens with crystal-like skin stopped their conversation to watch. Several robotic service units paused in their cleaning routines, their sensors detecting the elevated stress levels in the area. General Han remained perfectly calm, his hands visible and relaxed at his sides. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Officer Kai," he said, reading the alien's name badge. "My credentials are in order, and I have clearance for VIP transport to the council chambers." "Credentials can be faked," Kai replied, his voice growing louder. "And humans are notorious for their deception." He gestured broadly with his upper arms while his lower hands moved closer to his weapons. "I've seen dozens of your kind try to sneak into restricted areas. You think because you managed to build a few primitive ships, you deserve the same respect as species that have been traveling the stars for thousands of years." The crowd around them was growing larger now. Alien civilians pressed closer, their various forms of eyes and sensory organs focused on the unfolding drama. Some seemed nervous while others appeared curious about how this confrontation would play out. A few younger aliens even started recording with their personal devices, probably planning to share the incident on the galactic information networks. General Han noticed the attention, but didn't seem bothered by it. If anything, he appeared to be waiting for something. His calm demeanor only seemed to anger Kai more. "You're coming with me for questioning," Kai declared, reaching for his plasma restraints with two of his hands while keeping his other arms ready to draw his energy weapon. "And afterward, you'll be on the first transport back to whatever backwater planet you crawled out of." The station's usual sounds seemed to quiet as everyone waited to see what would happen next. General Han slowly raised his hands, palms open, and facing toward the increasingly agitated security officer Kai. His movements were deliberate and practiced, the kind of careful gestures someone learns after years of dealing with hostile situations across the galaxy. Despite the weapon now pointed at his chest, his voice remained steady and respectful. "Officer Kai, I understand your concerns, but there's been a serious misunderstanding here," Han said, his tone carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. "If you'll just contact your superior or check with Station Command, they can verify my identity and purpose for being here." But Kai's 6 eyes blazed with anger and something deeper, a prejudice that had been building for years. His energy weapon hummed to life, casting an eerie blue glow across the metal floor of the checkpoint area. The weapon was a standard issue, plasma disruptor, capable of stunning or at higher settings, completely vaporizing a human-sized target. Other aliens in the area recognized the sound immediately and began moving away from the confrontation. "Save your lies for someone who might believe them," Kai snarled, his 4 arms now working in coordination. 2 held the weapon steady while the others gestured dismissively. "I've been working security on this station for over 20 years. I know a fake when I see one." The crowd that had gathered around Checkpoint 7 began to shift and murmur. Most of the aliens seemed to approve of Kai's aggressive stance. A group of reptilian traders from the outer systems hissed their approval, while several insectoid beings clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their species. To them, seeing a human put in their place was entertainment. But, scattered throughout the crowd, other humans watched the scene unfold with growing fear. Jin, a young human trader who had been waiting in line to process his cargo permits, took several steps backward. His hands shook as he clutched his documentation, knowing that whatever happened to the uniformed human could easily happen to him next. Beside him, Mia, a human engineer who worked on one of the civilian repair docks, pulled her hood up and tried to blend in with the crowd. They had both seen this before. Humans might be part of the galactic community now, but they were barely tolerated in most sectors. Here in Sector 7, which was controlled by the old Alien Alliance, humans were treated like second-class citizens at best. They paid higher taxes, faced constant searches, and were often barred from the better jobs and living quarters. "Please," Jin whispered to Mia, "we should leave before this gets worse." Mia nodded, but neither of them moved. Something about the way the uniformed human stood, calm and unafraid despite the weapon pointed at him, made them curious. Most humans would be begging or trying to run by now. Around the checkpoint, the station's automated systems continued their work. Cleaning robots rolled between the groups of onlookers, their sensors adjusting to navigate around the crowd. Overhead, the station's massive artificial gravity generators hummed quietly, keeping everyone's feet planted firmly on the deck. Through the transparent walls, the stars wheeled slowly as the station rotated, and the running lights of passing ships created streaks of color in the darkness. "You know what your problem is," Kai continued, his voice growing louder and attracting even more attention. "You humans think that because you managed to reverse engineer some alien technology and build a few ships, you deserve respect. But we know the truth. You're a violent, primitive species that barely belongs in space." Several aliens in the crowd voiced their agreement. A tall, thin being with multiple arms raised them all in a gesture of support. Another creature, resembling a walking tree with bark-like skin, rustled its branches in what might have been applause. "Your kind started 3 wars in the last 50 years, Kai went on, warming to his subject. "You've disrupted trade routes, interfered with established governments, and somehow convinced the Galactic Council to give you a seat at the table. But here on my station, you follow our rules." General Han listened to the speech without interrupting, his expression remaining calm despite the growing hostility around him. When Kai finally paused for breath, Han spoke again, his voice carrying clearly through the area. "I respect your authority, Officer Kai, and I have no intention of causing trouble," he said. "But I do need to reach the council chambers for an important meeting. Perhaps we could resolve this quickly by simply verifying my credentials through proper channels?" "There are no proper channels for humans who impersonate officers," Kai snapped back. "The only place you're going is to a holding cell until we can arrange transport back to whatever human colony will take you." The crowd pressed closer now, sensing that the confrontation was reaching its peak. Some aliens began placing bets on how long it would take security to drag the human away. Others started recording the incident, planning to share it later as an example of human arrogance being properly handled. But Jin and Mia noticed something the others didn't. Despite being surrounded by hostile aliens and having a weapon pointed at him, the human in the military uniform didn't look scared. If anything, he seemed to be waiting for something. Officer Kai's 4 hands moved with practiced efficiency as he reached for the plasma restraints hanging from his belt. The metal cuffs were designed to handle beings much larger and stronger than humans, with energy dampeners that would prevent any chance of escape. Around them, the crowd of alien onlookers pressed closer, eager to see the troublesome human finally put in his place. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," Kai commanded, his energy weapon still humming with deadly power. "Any sudden movements and I'll assume you're resisting arrest." General Han remained perfectly still, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't quite ready to surrender. Just as Kai took his first step forward, a soft electronic chime echoed from Han's uniform jacket. The sound was barely audible over the noise of the busy station, but it made Han's expression change slightly. "Officer, if I may," Han said politely, "I need to answer this communication. It might help clear up this entire situation." "No tricks," Kai growled, but his curiosity got the better of him. "Make it quick." Han slowly reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small, sleek communication device. The technology looked more advanced than standard civilian equipment, with a crystalline display that shimmered with multiple colors. As soon as he activated it, a clear, authoritative voice filled the air around Checkpoint 7. "General Han, this is Admiral Lear speaking from the flagship Constellation. The Galactic Council is waiting for your briefing on Operation Starfall. We're running behind schedule, sir." The words hit the crowd like a shockwave. Kai's weapon wavered slightly, his 6 eyes blinking in confusion. Admiral Lear was a name that every being in this sector knew. She was the commanding officer of the largest human fleet in known space, a military leader whose reputation stretched across multiple star systems. But before anyone could fully process what they had just heard, another voice crackled through the communication device. This one belonged to a younger officer, speaking with the crisp efficiency of someone reporting to a superior. "General Han, this is Commander Rio aboard the Dreadnought Victory. Sir, the human fleet is in position per your orders. All 37 ships are maintaining formation around the station. We're ready to proceed with the liberation protocols whenever you give the word." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the station's background noise seemed to fade as hundreds of aliens tried to understand what they had just heard. 37 ships, liberation protocols. The human standing calmly at Checkpoint 7 wasn't just any traveler. He was apparently in command of an entire fleet. Kai's plasma weapon began to shake in his grip. His confident sneer slowly melted away, replaced by a look of growing panic. Around them, the other aliens began to murmur uncertainly, their earlier confidence evaporating like steam in space. "That's impossible," Kai whispered, but his voice carried clearly in the sudden quiet. "Humans don't have fleets that size. They don't have the technology or the resources to—" His words were cut off as the station's emergency communication system suddenly activated. A mechanical voice echoed through the entire facility, reaching every corridor, every shop, every living space on the massive structure. "Attention all station personnel. This is an automated message from traffic control. We are currently surrounded by 37 unidentified vessels of human origin. The ships appear to be military class, including several dreadnought-type vessels. All security forces report to your stations immediately." The crowd around Checkpoint 7 erupted into chaos. Aliens who had been enjoying the confrontation moments before now looked terrified. The reptilian traders who had been hissing their approval began backing away toward the nearest exits. The insectoid beings stopped their clicking and started, making high-pitched sounds that their translators couldn't interpret. Jin and Mia, the two human civilians who had been watching from the edge of the crowd, looked at each other with amazement. They had heard stories about human military forces, but like most civilians, they had never seen them in action. The idea that this quiet, polite man in the military uniform was actually commanding officer of such a massive fleet was almost too much to believe, sir, came another voice through Han's communication device, this one belonging to someone with a slight accent. This is Captain Yoon aboard the cruiser Determination. Station defense systems are powered down as requested. No. Resistance detected. The alien security forces appear to be standing down. Officer Kai's forearms began to tremble. The plasma weapon in his grip was still charged and ready to fire, but now it seemed like a toy compared to the firepower apparently surrounding the station. Through the transparent walls of the checkpoint area, he could just make out tiny lights. In the distance, lights that he now realized were the running lights of human warships. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "They're just humans. They're supposed to be the weak ones. They're supposed to be afraid of us." General Han finally reached up and touched his communication device, switching it to a private channel. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried an authority that made even the largest aliens in the crowd take a step back. "Admiral Leah, this is General Han. I'm currently dealing with a small diplomatic situation at Checkpoint 7. Please maintain current positions and await further orders. I believe this matter will be resolved shortly." The implications of his words settled over the crowd like a heavy blanket. The massive holographic displays that lined the central hub of First Contact Station flickered to life without warning. These screens, normally used for announcements about docking schedules and trade regulations, suddenly showed something that made every alien in the area freeze in terror. The crystal-clear images revealed the space around the station in perfect detail, and what they showed was impossible to ignore. Dozens of human warships floated in perfect formation around the massive space station. The closest vessels were so large they blocked out entire sections of stars, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive gray and blue colors of the human space navy. At the center of the formation sat three enormous dreadnoughts, each one easily twice the size of the station itself. Their weapon ports glowed with barely contained energy, and their shield generators created shimmering barriers that distorted the starlight behind them. The crowd at Checkpoint 7 stared up at the displays in stunned silence. These weren't the small crude ships that most aliens associated with human space travel. These were vessels built for war, designed by engineers who understood the deadly mathematics of space combat. Each ship bristled with weapon systems that could reduce a planet to ash, and their sleek designs spoke of technology that rivaled anything the older alien civilizations had produced. But what truly terrified the watching aliens was the sheer number of ships. The displays kept shifting angles, showing more and more vessels arranged in perfect military formation, cruisers, destroyers, support ships, and craft that looked like nothing anyone had seen before. It was a fleet large enough to conquer entire star systems. Officer Kai's plasma weapon slipped from his trembling hands and clattered to the metal floor. His 6 eyes darted between the displays and General Han, who stood calmly in the center of the chaos with a slight smile on his face. The human looked completely at ease, as if being surrounded by terrified aliens was nothing new to him. The largest display screen, positioned directly above the checkpoint area, suddenly shifted to show the bridge of one of the dreadnoughts. A woman in a crisp human naval uniform appeared on the screen, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation style, and her eyes sharp with intelligence and authority. The insignia on her collar identified her as an admiral, one of the highest ranks in any military organization. "General Han," Admiral Anna said, her voice echoing clearly through the station's speakers, "we've completed the encirclement of Sector 7. All strategic positions are secured, and the alien defense fleets have withdrawn to minimum safe distance. Shall we proceed with the liberation of Sector 7 as planned?" The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Liberation of Sector 7? That meant this wasn't just a show of force. It was the beginning of a complete takeover of one of the most important trade sectors in the galaxy, and apparently it was all being coordinated by the quiet human who had been standing at a simple immigration checkpoint just minutes earlier. General Han looked up at the screen and nodded slightly. "Thank you, Admiral Anna. Maintain current positions for now. I'm still handling some diplomatic matters on the station, but we should be ready to proceed shortly." As the implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in, some of the older aliens in the crowd started to whisper among themselves. Their voices carried words that made the situation even more terrifying for those who understood the full meaning. "That's him," whispered an elderly alien with crystal-like skin, his voice shaking with fear. "That's General Han, the ghost of the Outer Rim." "No, it can't be," replied another alien, but his voice lacked conviction. "The ghost. There's just a legend. Look at him," the first alien insisted, pointing with a trembling appendage. "Look at how calm he is. Look at that fleet. Only one human commander has ever assembled forces like that." The whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. General Han, the legendary human commander who had appeared seemingly from nowhere 5 years earlier and changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. He was the one who had defeated the Krillian Empire in the Battle of Three Suns, using strategy and tactics that military scholars still couldn't fully understand. He had single-handedly broken the siege of New Terra, saving over 1 billion human colonists from certain death. Most famously, he had liberated the human slave colonies in the Andromeda sector, defeating 3 different alien empires in a campaign that lasted only 6 months. Entire alien fleets had surrendered rather than face his forces in battle. His reputation had grown until even the most arrogant alien military leaders spoke his name with respect and fear. Jin and Mia, the 2 human civilians, stared up at the displays with tears in their eyes. They had grown up hearing stories about the ghost of the Outer Rim, the mysterious human general who appeared wherever humans were oppressed and somehow always found a way to victory. But they had never imagined they would see him in person, standing just a few meters away in an immigration line. The cleaning robots that had been working around the checkpoint had stopped their tasks and were now scanning the area with their sensors, trying to process the unprecedented situation. Even the automated systems seemed confused by what was happening. Officer Kai finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "You're him. You're really him. The ghost of the Outer Rim." General Han turned his attention back to the trembling alien security officer, and for the first time since the confrontation began, there was something harder in his expression. "I prefer General Han," he said quietly. "And yes, Officer Kai, I am exactly who you think I am." The plasma weapon hit the metal floor with a sharp clang that echoed through the suddenly quiet checkpoint area. Officer Kai's forearms hung limply at his sides as he took several unsteady steps backward, his 6 eyes wide with shock and something that looked very much like fear. The confidence and arrogance that had defined him just moments earlier had completely disappeared, replaced by the dawning realization of exactly who he had been threatening. "General Han," Kai whispered, his voice barely audible above the hum of the station's systems. I didn't know. Please, sir, I was just doing my job. I didn't understand." General Han bent down and picked up the fallen weapon, examining it briefly before setting it on the nearby security desk. His movements were calm and deliberate, showing no anger or desire for revenge, despite everything that had just happened. When he looked at Kai again, there was something almost gentle in his expression. "Officer Kai," he said quietly, "you were indeed doing your job as you understood it, but perhaps it's time to understand that job differently." Around them, the transformation was already beginning. Through the transparent walls of the station, everyone could see the human ships moving into new positions. Instead of the aggressive formation they had maintained during the initial encirclement, the vessels were now arranging themselves into a protective pattern around the space station. Transport ships began docking at the civilian ports, and teams of human engineers and administrators started boarding the station through the main airlocks. But this wasn't an invasion in the traditional sense. There were no armed soldiers marching through the corridors, no weapons being pointed at civilians. No demands for immediate surrender. Instead, human personnel moved through the station with calm efficiency, introducing themselves to alien workers and asking how they could help improve conditions. The main display screens continued to show what was happening throughout Sector 7. The human fleet had spread out across the entire region, taking positions at every major trade route and communication relay. But instead of blockading or destroying these facilities, the human ships were protecting them. Trade vessels that had been forced to pay excessive fees and bribes for months were suddenly finding their paths clear and their cargo inspections completed quickly and fairly. Within the first hour, word began spreading through the galactic communication networks. Sector 7, which had been controlled by a corrupt alliance of alien governments for decades, was now under human protection. The oppressive laws that had made life difficult for smaller species and independent traders were being suspended. The taxation system that had enriched a few powerful alien families while keeping everyone else in poverty was being completely restructured. Officer Kai found himself watching these changes with growing amazement. He had spent 20 years enforcing rules that he had never really questioned, simply because that's how things had always been done. Now he was seeing those same rules being replaced with something that actually made sense. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. Kai turned to see a young human woman in the uniform of a fleet administrator. Her name tag read Lieutenant Sue, and she carried a datapad filled with new protocols and procedures. "We're reorganizing the security department. We'd like to offer you a position in the new system if you're interested." Kai stared at her in confusion. "You want me to keep working after what I did?" Lieutenant Sue smiled. "General Han believes that people can change when given the opportunity. Your experience with station operations would be valuable, and we need officers who understand how things work here. The only requirement is that you're willing to treat everyone fairly, regardless of their species." Over the following days, the transformation of Sector 7 became complete. The human fleet maintained its protective presence, while civilian administrators worked to establish new systems of government and trade. Officer Kai found himself working alongside humans, learning new ways of thinking about law enforcement and justice. The most surprising part was how well it worked. Jin and Mia, the human civilians who had witnessed the confrontation at the checkpoint, soon found themselves with new opportunities. Jin was offered a management position in the expanded trade operations, while Mia was recruited to help design improvements to the station's engineering systems. But it wasn't just humans who benefited. Alien families who had struggled under the old system suddenly found themselves with better jobs, fairer treatment, and real opportunities for advancement. The station became a place where ability and character mattered more than species or political connections. Officer Kai, now working as a senior security coordinator under human command, often thought back to that day at Checkpoint 7. His prejudices had been built up over years of propaganda and cultural conditioning, but they had crumbled in the face of actual evidence. He had learned to see past species differences and recognize true leadership when he encountered it. As he walked through the bustling corridors of the station, watching humans and aliens working together in ways that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier, Kai realized something important. The humans hadn't conquered Sector 7 through superior firepower alone, though they certainly possessed that. They had won through something much more powerful, the simple idea that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. The humans had once again proven their worth among the stars, not as conquerors, but as liberators. The end